All right, everyone. AfD has managed to take second place in German politics now. It is now the second largest party, according to polling, for whatever that's worth. Some people say that AfD is like we're the far right party, like I guess the Nazi party or something. That's what they're worried about. They're not. They're actually center right. It's just like Merkel's party. They cast it as center right. It's actually center left. Like, I don't understand. Europeans skew things so far to the left that they think that a socialist party is part of the general normal centrist core of things. So, excuse me while I ignore the fact that you think AfD is actually far right. It's a routine, mundane, conservative movement, to tell the truth. Their proposals are not particularly draconian. It's considered far left in Germany if you want to have an actual national border and say, maybe the European Union, maybe we should be one of those states, one of those, at this point, many states, saying that the European Union shouldn't be loading the entire continent with people that continuously don't want to assimilate because, the French and the Americans are the ones causing the refugee crisis by bombing civilians out of their homes in the first place. Maybe that's not a great idea. We're having to put up truck barriers all around the Christmas market, but that's okay. Say Merkel's people. It's a small price to pay for having other people come into the country instead of just encouraging our native population to breed. Like, where are you putting all these people anyway? Germany's already overpopulated. How many tens of millions of people are crammed into that little area? It's like what? It's not even as big as Texas. It's not as big as France or anything. You get 20 million extra people? It's crazy. Some of these countries, where do you even have any trees? Your idea of the wilderness is like fucking Berlin's Central Park, I guess. That's crazy talk. Why would you want to live that way? Friggin' machine people is what you're going to end up with. Oh, it's Germany, so that's okay. No, Euroscepticism is continuing to grow, but it's been a silent growth for the last year. People are so fixated, I think, on the nativist issue here that they're almost forgetting about the core of Euroscepticism that really kicks off a lot of this stuff. Really, it's about, here in the United States, it's not even for people outside of the border states, I think. It's more about the fact that through communication technology, they can see the root of multiculturalism's problems elsewhere, more than it is any actual problem within their own communities. Like, I'll look out the window and everything's homogenous. I'm in Vermont, despite the fact that I am near a border, but, Canadians and Vermonters are the same thing. We like maple syrup. And we can deal with weather that would freeze the average person to death. So that makes us, we're similar in culture. I look at that and I say, well, there's no problem here. But then I can also look and see that migrant, the truck driver video there that got put into limited state, the Hungarian truck driver. And I can see, well, yeah, there are places in the world that have desperate problems because of multiculturalism. It begins to change people's minds. It begins to denigrate the old practice, which was out of sight, out of mind, really. Where if the cable news isn't talking about it, you don't perceive the problem. That's impossible now. That's why they want to censor information online so much, because they realize people are beginning to realize that the whole world has problems and that a lot of those problems boil down to a few essential things. The world is run by corrupt people who don't care about anybody. We used to be honest about this. People who are on the left used to be honest. 10 years ago, they were like, oh, the globalists want World War III. The globalists are bombing the Iraqis for no reason. They want the oil. It was a praise Ron Paul. They were honest about it. They understood that globalism and stuff was a problem. They understood people should leave each other alone, right? Now they're dishonest. Now they don't think that anymore. Now they think that people should be crammed in together involuntarily, lose all of their heritage, and that war is okay, proxy war is okay. We need to take in the same refugees that we are creating by bombing their home country. Makes perfect sense. We used to call that a warmongering, interventionist, crazy foreign policy. We used to say that's like worse than the grand chessboard stuff. That's worse than nuclear stalemate politics. It's like the new, more cancerous evolution of everything wrong with U.S. foreign policy for a half century. Now the left says, oh, well, if you oppose this, you're a racist or something. You're xenophobic. You don't want to take this family under your roof that you just bombed? Well, you're a xenophobe. No, I think it's called you're sane. That's just my opinion, though. I think that's a growing opinion. I'm not surprised AfD would be the second largest. I would be surprised if they don't keep growing. Here's the problem, though. The problem is that because a lot of Germans are convinced that they're racist and they're evil, they're controlled by Russia, maybe. I'm sure Merkel will trot that line out any day now for some A/B testing. Because of that, a lot of people don't want their parties to form a coalition with them. I think they've got like, what, one or two other small parties that talk to them, and that's about it, maybe a quarter of the population of all Germany. So it's a growing movement, but it's not enough. It's not even as large as Merkel's own little party there. But there is no majority party. You've got to, I think, split government now, don't you? In Germany, there's like a dozen actual parties of merit. And so you got the Greens, the Socialists, the Communists, I guess the Labor, Christian Democrats. Do you have like a Republican Party or something, which is probably a left-wing party over there? AfD, you know, some of these other little like coalitional parties. It's very weird how German politics operates. It doesn't make sense how any European country does its politics, other than like maybe Austria or something. You know, where you get it's pretty strict delineation. Van der Bellen versus Hofer. Now, who do you want? Do you want the Teutonic dude or a dude who's basically commie light? Pick your poison. Which of these draughts do you trust more not to kill you instantly? Within the UK, it's like a party can have 20% support, have no representation. Within France, it's like a party that ultimately probably is the largest still ends up losing because coalition forms against them. But it's also not technically a coalition government; it's just for the highest seat. And then in Germany, it's like, which of these 12 parties do you like? And I think, don't you do runoff or some crazy thing like that? It's just so funny. So Merkel's having problems because even though she got reelected, it's by a lower threshold and her main adversary has grown to be the second largest party. At some point, they will gain legitimacy by their size. At some point, a movement that formerly was chastised as well, they're pointless, fringe, they're crazy, because it becomes popular enough, it creeps up on you, gets to some certain threshold, and all of a sudden people who avoided it primarily because it was unpopular and fringe no longer have that problem. It wasn't any moral problem that they had with the platform. It was basically, a lot of people say, well, I hear from the media or from Merkel or whatever that AfD are fanatics. I want a party that's kind of similar but less fanatic, so I voted for Merkel's so-called center-right party instead, because she says, we need to do something about the burqa, and yeah, we can't take unlimited numbers of refugees, while doing nothing about the issue. The fact that she's doing nothing is why AfD, I think it grew by, 3 points over that period of time since the last polls. It's a significant amount of growth it's caused. And I've warned about this, that Europe is going to be torn apart, possibly, if the EU isn't significantly reformed or dissolved, ultimately, if states don't leave it in order to cripple it. And it doesn't regress into just a block of maybe very wealthy first world nations that have different demographic and economic problems than Eastern and Southern Europe, certainly. If it doesn't reform or balkanize into these sort of more similar economic blocks, what you will have is that because of inaction and stagnation, and because of bureaucratic strangling, and because these establishment parties don't work well together either, other than in Germany it seems, what will happen is smaller upstart movements that are at the fringes will begin to rise up. People, ultimately one feeds the other. AfD grows, therefore the far left grows as a reaction because they no longer believe that the center left or center right is capable of keeping them away. They'll say, well, the Nazis are coming. We got to join the commies. And then AfD says, look, the commie party's growing. We need, you need to join us. Merkel can't save you from the communists. Do you want a communist Germany or do you want to side with people who care about Germany? Come and join us. Take up arms. We're going to be marching with torches soon. This has happened before. This happened in Weimar, Germany. It was funny, I was talking to Colette. He said, the Nazis rose to power without violence. It's actually totally wrong. What happened is that for years, the Nazi Party and the Communist Party beat each other in the streets, actually, and constantly attempted to kill one another's leaders, and constantly attempted to commit arson against one another's headquarters. The center was dumb. They didn't know what to do. The economy got worse. They were powerless. A lot of people within the military and industrial complex didn't like the centrists. They didn't have faith in them. They looked over at the Soviet Union. They began to get kind of worried, and they said, well, maybe these National Socialists are a little bit better an alternative. And so they started to be a little bit more hands-off when it came to attempting to suppress violence from Hitler's upstart movement. Meanwhile, you also had people who backed the communists and did the same thing. What you're going to get is a breakdown of order at some point. in which the far left and far right of Europe are too numerous and too violent at some point, against one another mainly, for the center to do anything about it. It will begin to seep into the militaries there. It will begin to seep into the police there. By and large, they'll back the right, probably, because they're going to favor them over the far left. Honestly, they're going to back the far right of Europe. I hope that Merkel realizes this. It's not going to be her commie friends that primarily end up in positions of power through that transitional period. Now, it's easy enough to reform the situation. You simply have to deflate social alienation. No attempt is being made to do this. Everyone's simply being cast off as a bigot if they rock the boat. So it's never going to happen. It'd be funny. The European Union, that great project, might end up very quickly collapsing simply because the Eastern Europeans say, fuck it, they leave. The Northern Europe is like, we'll form a bloc with the UK. They've even openly suggested like a Northern European bloc. The UK and Iceland and Norway and Sweden and Denmark sort of forming their own union. They're capable of doing it. By the way, it would work if they did that. They've got similar enough economic situations. They can have their sort of weird, intervened in trade arrangement stuff. Germany would have its bloc, the Czech Republic, and Austria and stuff. It would very funnily begin to resemble, I think, a different country, historically speaking. And then we would have maybe the Eastern European bloc, probably run by Poland, mainly, Poland and Hungary. It would probably extend down into Southern Europe. That would be the one we'd work best with. Romania and Poland and some of these countries feel way more positively. There are countries in Eastern Europe and countries in Southeast Asia, oddly, where people feel more positively about the U.S. than the U.S. feels about the U.S. You look at the Philippines, and Duterte, he's doing a pretty good job. You haven't heard much lately about how evil he is now from the world stage, have you? He's gained legitimacy. Country hasn't fallen apart. He's cleaning up drug dealers. Good for him. A little draconian, but he is doing that. You look at Poland. People, I think, at some point realize that it's more upsetting to see 250,000 people from outside of your country in the streets than 250,000 people within your country in the streets waving Polish flags. Obviously, at some point, that becomes pretty evident, so people are going to back that. But the European Union is failing. I'm not surprised AfD is growing. It's a Eurosceptic movement, predominantly, but also a populistic and nativistic movement. That's a good thing. Nativism is good for a country. There's nothing wrong with favoring your native people over people from outside. Immigration's fine, but you got to have a controlled system. You can't just say, well, we're going to have a totally opaque process. We're not even going to tell people how many migrants are in their country, and then we're going to call them names. We're going to call them a bigot if they complain about the situation. Well, that's just a cop-out. It's not bigotry. It's called, hey, the government's supposed to represent people who are paying taxes within the country. It's not doing that right now. We're having that problem too. The Democrats are losing on that issue for a reason. People are tired of paying limitless sums of money to an opaque government that doesn't even represent them. When I see the presidential rankings, I'll go, Trump is dead last. That's funny. He's still managing to get things accomplished. You'd think that if he were truly dead last in the eyes of the population, he wouldn't be capable of doing that. He wouldn't have any mandate. He wouldn't even be in office. He would have been forced to resign by his own party at that point. Not going to happen. That's about all. Peace out.